So it's a presentations about philosophy, communication, and positioning. And what I did with this presentation and the contextual presentation for next week is I used clips mostly from the recent World Cup in 2023 in France, just because there was so much going on, there was so much discussion about it, and I think it's still fresh in our minds. And the clips we're showing and how we look at them and how we sort of analyze them, it's not criticizing anybody, but it's just helping everybody to be better referees, to be better stewards of the game as such. So with that said, we can start with philosophy. And I think with this next statement that I speak for everyone that's here, is that the reason why we're involved in the game is because we love rugby. Every single one of us, we all have a story about that moment that we fell in love with the game. We all have a story about why we're involved in rugby. And I think it's really important for us to always think back about that, about your own personal story, and to remember why you're involved in this game. Because I think sometimes we get a little bit too serious, even with each other in the game, and sometimes there's conflict. But if we remember where we come from and why we're doing this, we can always be there and remember that every other person has got probably a similar story, and that together, we are a community, and we're here to support each other. So therefore, every moment we challenge ourselves to be better and to make the game better. And besides the team coaches that are on here, most of us, we just happen to be referees, right? And that is our contribution to the game and our involvement in the game. What we are here to do is we're here to create a playing environment that allows both teams to compete on an even playing field so that they can determine the outcome of the game. I think this is very, very important for us as referees, is that, we see so much footage of referees involved where you sort of take center stage, or when you're refereeing a game where you accidentally sort of take center stage. And I think for us, it's always important that we remember that our job is just to facilitate the game. And if we can maintain this philosophy in every single game, we create that environment where the teams decide the outcome, and we're just there to make sure that that happens. And for those of you that are not muted, if you could please mute yourself, that would be really cool. Thank you. And also, as we're going through these clips, I'm going to ask questions. Feel free to contribute. We'll just go and see who hasn't muted themselves. Hopefully that'll do it. So, communication. Relationships are built or broken one conversation at a time. Something that we can always remind ourselves about, right? So every conversation we have, we're either adding value or taking value away from a relationship. So just think about this. Even when you're in a situation, might be a conflict situation with a player, always think that, how do you build a relationship? Even if it's not just coming back at you in the same way, always take the high road and always think about how you can be positive in your communication to build a better relationship. Always remember, less is more, and we'll talk about that more as we go through the presentation. And as they say in kindergarten, use your words. Right, and we're going to go straight into it. So here are two communications in one match, from a referee to players, and vice from players to referee.
Good Come down. I'm not going to have you shout all day, okay? And use it, please. Hold. Out you go then. Tom, I'm bored now. Enough. Use it.
So feel free to unmute yourself and, you know, if you have any comments about this. But here are two examples of, obviously, and it happens a lot in games that you referee, where players are talking to you or they're shouting at you in certain situations. And there are many ways that you can communicate with them. Often, the best time to be talking to players if they're shouting at you would be during downtime, because then everybody's calm. But if players are shouting to you whilst the game is on and you start talking back to them, it could go back and forward. And always remember that all the communication that you use should be positive. And I mean, even in this situation, you know, when the referee says to the player that the referee is bored, you know, in this situation, the player could say back to you, like, why are you bored? Because there's a human centipede on the field, right? Something like that. So if you get some smart players, then you start creating banter. So just think about when you communicate to them, when you ask them to not shout at you during the game, it's always something you can do in downtime, and you can talk to the captain, right? But just make sure that all your communication is always respectful. I mean, the days of waiting for a referee to come up with some smart quip that, you know, that everybody's going to laugh about or make it to TikTok or, you know, social media. Just think about all your communication. It's got to be professional as possible.
Latcher. Latcher, straight on the ground. Time off. Okay. Can I speak, please?
And they make it slow. He touches the ball and then he leaves.
Yeah, he's good at the beginning, but after he go off feet and ball is available.
Yeah, but he made it slow already.
That's my view. That's not your view. I understand. That's just my view. Just can I say something?
It's cynical.
Can I say something? When you arrive with Latcher on the ball carrier, yeah, and your number 6, I told him at the house time that you have to pay attention on that. Okay, he flies in the rack and he arrives. Most of the time, is a 50-50 picture for me. Okay, so if you can help me, that's good. Thanks.
Any thoughts on that from anyone? Any comments? How you would handle it differently? How you could preempt these situations?
Hey,
No?
it's Khalil. I think
Hey, Khalil.
the conversation there, having it with a gold penalty is probably not a good time. But after they kicked a touch, if 7 wants to talk while they go and set up the lineup, maybe a better time to have a quick, here's what I saw kind of clarification. But to your point, I think the discussion there is more destructive than productive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And thanks, Khalil. I think that one of the things we've discussed over the years that's really positive for referees is when you, during your pre-match or during the coin toss, when you speak to the captains, you can say to the captains, you know, if you have any questions, you can always come to me and ask, and I'll answer you. But we're not going to do it on opposition penalties, because, you know, on opposition penalties, those situations look very confrontational, and as you can see, they are confrontational, and it just creates a situation that, you know, it doesn't come across very well. So if you already said that to the captain, then as Khalil said, the captain probably won't be confrontational at that moment. But it's also up to you to A, set that stage, and then B, when you're refereeing, that you are setting it up to be able to manage it properly. And I think, let me just stop sharing here for a second and just make sure if you can see my video. So I think one of the things that the referees are always forgetting, if I could just get the video up there, if you can see me, one of the things that referees always should remember in the process of the communication is that when you blow your, first thing is you blow your whistle, you award the penalty. So just think about this, you blow the whistle, you award the penalty to your primary signal. And please make sure that you always, we all have mirrors at home. Practice at home with your signals, you know, that your signals are perfect. You know, you don't want to be giving penalties like this. You don't want to be playing advantage like that. You want to make sure that your signals are perfect, right? Especially when it comes to free kicks. Free kicks are very difficult. It's like a really strange thing to do, to keep your arms straight, you know, with your body. It's not like this. It's not like this. Make sure your signals are perfect. So you go primary, you blow your whistle, primary signal. You wait a moment and you can go 5 blue off their feet, because that verbal communication is for everybody around you. And then people start clearing, and then you go 1 signal. And the reason why you don't give multiple signals or repeat yourself too many times is because it gives the appearance that you are unsure of yourself. So if you blow the penalty and you go off feet, and you do this, you know, it looks like you're either aggressive or you're unhappy with what you're doing. So just think about keeping it very, very simple. Primary signal, 1 verbal communication, 5 blue off their feet, and 1 signal. And make sure that your signals are very clear. You know, you don't be making up signals as you go on. So it's very simple, and it's great communication for everybody on the field and for people watching the game.
Barnage over. Barnage. Get up on the wrong side. You must roll, not stand up. Roll, not stand up.
So here's an example of a referee that has got very, very clear communication. As I said, probably a little bit rushed. So just think primary, 1 verbal communication, and 1 signal. You know, I mean, he's using some signaling that's not necessarily directly out of the law book, but if you stick to the law book, it's always very, very clear.
Richard, on that piece, on that clip, this is Tim, on that clip, what was the time on the clock?
I actually do not know what the time on the clock was.
Would his call been influenced by the time?
No, I don't think so. I think that because this game was so tight all the way through, from the first minute to the 80th minute, that I don't think it would have influenced him. I just think that he, I think obviously, you know, you have those situations where we've seen a lot of those where the scrum off runs into the player and the referee goes play on, right? And I just think that if it happens a couple of times, the referee might just call it at some point. And I think in this game, because it was so, it was quite competitive at all the breakdowns, that, you know, he was probably trying to make a statement here.
Right, but he'd make the statement here. Make the statement here would have impact. Would be impacted by the clock, and that's my piece, I think.
No, I think this was earlier in the game, for sure. Yeah, it was earlier in the game.
Okay.
Yeah. So empathy, and don't mistake empathy with sympathy. Empathy is the capacity to understand another person's experience from their frame of reference. And we know that when we're dealing with players, sometimes players are frustrated, you know, so they might say things they might not necessarily mean, or they might say something that is completely true, but it's offensive. But it's able to understand what the situation is. A lot of times in games, especially when they're close, there's a lot of pressure on players. So always understanding their perspective helps you to be able to manage the game better. It helps you to understand the context, and also helps you to build relationships. And we talked earlier about your communication should always be positive. It doesn't mean that you should let people walk over you, but it means that, just think about the words you use and the sentences you use, that it always comes from a positive perspective to always promote pro-social behavior. So always trying to improve the relationship between you and the players. So you can positively influence player behavior and to keep building trust. And always remember that it's about rugby and it's not about you. And that even though some of the comments might seem personal, it's a good thing not to take them personally. I don't know if you remember a couple of years ago, I think it was 21 or 2020, when we had this professional learning series. Olivia was talking about body language and tone and words. And if you look at this, how one is perceived on the field, and we talked earlier about just, your signaling, your communication, whether it's clear, body language, it's 55%, tone of voice, 38%, and words and content are only 7%. So just think about that. It's really important that you're always standing up straight. Your signals are very, very clear. Your appearance is confident. Your tone of voice is confident. And then hopefully the few words that you do use, that they make sense. And don't forget that less is always more. Body language, voice tone, and words in that order. This is a very old clip, but it's comes across very well.
Hey, look, we've got a hell of a game going with great tempo. Both teams tend to want to take the ball away at quick tap penalties, and I will not allow it. I will escalate to yellow cards if I need to, not again.
Just in front, in line with me.
Okay, just in front of the half.
Good refereeing.
So I'm sure you all noticed the first thing the referee did there is he gave a positive message that it's a really great game, everything's going well, except this one thing's happening, and that he won't allow it. So the message is pretty clear to the captions. And we're going to look at a clip in a few moments just about communication under pressure and those pressure situations, but when you communicate and how you communicate. And this is a very tense game, very close, last 10 minutes of the game.
Advantage offside, number 16. Knocked on, stop. You can if you want. You can if you want now. Number 16 offside, then a knock on. Stop. Behind the line to start with. You can't dummy taking that, okay? No, thank you, play the ball. Stay on the line. Penalty advantage. Ball is out. That ball is out. Advantage white. Sixteen, side 16. Release.
Any thoughts on that couple of penalties? Three
Penalty
penalties.
try.
Penalty try for which part?
Everything. There was such a thing as bias. It was demonstrated in those clips, in that piece of play.
Right.
And anybody sitting in their house watching that game, they weren't thinking the same thing if they lost their minds.
Right.
So, Richard, this is Olivia.
Hi, Olivia. I just saw a photo of you.
One thing I noticed, if you guys noticed, when he blew that penalty, White made a little move that they shouldn't have made. And he restarted it. And that was a very kind thing, but he was very clever because first he turned to red and said, don't move early. So he's given himself permission to now allow White to restart. And that was I call those asshole points because he was very kind to both teams. But I think that just, he's saying I'm a kind human. And then, the subsequent series where he's likely giving a yellow card to red. I just thought that was a nice way to go through the series and how he started it.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. And I think if we look at the three penalties here that we already had, obviously there's a lot of pressure on the field, and we've all had that in games where we feel like maybe our rhythm is slightly off. We're trying to look calm and in control, but we're sort of a little bit off, get bumped by players a little bit. We're not in the right position. The communication might be a little bit rushed, a little bit slow here. It gets to the situation where, what Olivia was just talking about, where he told the players that they've got to be behind the line. You can also understand that with the pressure, you might not be exactly 100% accurate. Like in those situations, players have to be on the line. You just make sure in all the communication that you put out there that it's very accurate according to law, right? So they've got to be on the line because the line's part of the goal line, and then just going through the process of multiple penalties, where, and I think sort of Tim pointed out penalty tries as a joke, but there were a lot of infringements, and they're right on the goal line, and the game's very close. The game is in the balance right here. So when he's blowing the penalty, and then he goes, he's sort of static for a moment on that spot in the penalty, and when you're close to the goal line, and we've discussed this before, and you blow the penalty and you've indicated the penalty, that you need to be ready for a quick tap, and you need to be away from that mark. So if you are not going to be talking to anybody and you've indicated a penalty, you've got to be aware that something can happen right now, right? And again, we had that scrum where this sort of awards a free kick, player bumps him, and somebody takes a quick tap. If you're going to award a free kick in that situation, you've got to be ready for it. You can't just blow free kicks and wait. You've got to be on the ball all the time, on the move and ready to go. And then that one place he's communicating, ball out. It's something that you probably don't need to do as a referee because you're putting more pressure on yourself in that space. But again, you have three penalties in this situation. Probably should have warned already. And even here, the first thing, when the referee blows the penalty, the third one before he goes to talk to them, indicates the penalty first. And we discussed how you take pressure off yourself in these situations. You're going to double whistle and stop the game. Then you're going to speak to them, and then you're going to come back and award the penalty, because once you've awarded the penalty, you should allow them to go ahead and take that penalty. So just think about it. And I know this is a lot to think about when you're in those situations, but probably should have warned the team earlier, and B, always remember to double whistle and stop the game when you're going to speak to them. The thing that's great here is the length of his communication that you'll see now is very short, very to the point, and it's something we definitely want to take out of this game and take into our own game, because we've always said 7 seconds, but if we sit here and we look at this, and we can have this brief discussion, you're going to go too many penalties in the area, speak to your players, I'll give you 5 seconds. You might think that's short, but when we are on the field and we're under pressure, we often talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. And if you're going to be talking more than 7 to 10 seconds, it seems like a lifetime for everybody watching. So just think about how you time yourself and that you have those sentences prepared.
Offside down here is becoming a trend. The discipline needs to improve or someone goes in the bin. Speak to them. No, speak to them. Speak to them.
So it was very clear, and it was actually only 6 seconds. Right, so it's clear and simple. Everybody can see won the team. No need to take a long discussion. So we talked about this already. Less is more. Use your words, whistle, speak, and signal. Positioning. What is the most important thing about refereeing on the field? What is the most important thing to you when you're on the field? Anybody?
Be able to see the ball.
I think that
Get
we
the
would
goal.
all know that.
Get the call correct.
Exactly, right? So never lose sight of the ball, or at least know where it is. I think it's the most important thing. So always know exactly where the ball is. And I think what we're going to talk about here is positioning and to get into position as quickly as possible. If you're in position as quickly as possible and you're able to be in a consistent position at all the breakdowns, you can actually make decisions that are very clear, and the things that you say will make sense to everybody. Even in general play, we're going to look at a couple of clips now from one of the semifinals where, the referees said this happened and that happened. And when you look at the actual video, you can see that that's not exactly what happened. And, things like players offside at a kick ahead, where your AR might come in if you do have an AR, all those kind of things where it's something that you should control, and I think it's really important for us as referees that we are in charge of the decisions that we make, that we're always in control. So even at a kick ahead, if AR goes, those players offside, you can't go, oh, they're offside, okay, I'll go with the call. But it's your job to always look around, look back, and make sure everyone's on side. You're going to tell players to stop if they're offside and all those kind of things, right? So consistent positioning, take charge of the game and your refereeing, that even when the AR makes a call and you have to go with them, call like live play, that you know what they're calling and it makes sense because you've seen it, or you're confident that it's correct.
All on. All on! All on! No lift! First tackler out, no lift on the ball. All on! All on! No lift! First tackler out, no lift on the ball. Advantage. Ruck. Ruck it forward.
All in front, right here, all in front.
Penalty?
In front, offside.
Advantage offside in front of the kicker.
So in this clip, this player was in front of the kicker, but just think as a referee, you can just look around and make sure that everyone's on side. Something you can communicate, and especially when they don't really have an effect on play.
Take him back. All on. No, I'm sealing. Hands on the ground. Watch behind you, Ben. Watch behind you. Owen. He's offside there, mate. 1. Offside, advantage. Penalty. On me. Offside. Ball came out of the ruck, but he was in front.
So, I know obviously it's a very high pressure game in those situations, but just think about always working to be in a good position as fast as you can, so you can see what's happening. So when you communicate, you're communicating clearly. Take charge of your refereeing, and just don't make rush decisions. You have to look at a situation like we look at this last. I mean, the previous penalty where he said the player's hands was on the ground when the player clearly took a defender out the way. And if you're in a consistent position, you can make more consistent decisions. And the very last clip where the player was maybe went offside for like a second and then never really affected the game. We don't want to make rush decisions. We want to make decisions that are very calm and very clear. And that even when you do have ARs and they come in and make calls, that you're still in control of the situation. And we're going to talk to Khalil, but we'll show a bit of a clip from a game in the spring. You can talk about that. But I've showed you this next little 3-minute video of Craig Javert back in, 2016 or something, 2015, when he was refereeing, where he talks about his positioning. It is very, very important that we as referees work hard to be borderline and to approach the breakdowns from a consistent position, and our communication is very clear, and we only use communication when we need to. And sorry, someone talking to me? No.
There's no magic referee position or referee running line that is perfect. They've all got pros and cons, and not all running lines or positions suit all athletes. Like we're all different. We've all got different strengths and weaknesses. Big thing with coaching referees is to be aware of the pros and cons of each different position that you take up. And then for each referee to decide for themselves which position are they most comfortable in, and then importantly to know what the downfalls of that position are. And so you're right, like around the time of the 2011 World Cup, I was getting myself probably a little bit wider and a little bit flatter than I did towards the end of my career. I felt after kind of in the last couple of years of my career, I wanted to have a bit more presence around the breakdown. So I wanted to get a little bit closer. But in order to do that, I needed to be in a position that was going to be closer to the breakdown. I couldn't be as flat because then I would have got turned sideways. So I needed to be a little bit deeper. But also then what I liked about that position is it allowed me to get ball line running earlier. And so I preferred it because I felt I was less reliant on ARs for things like forward passes because I was ball line running.
Right.
And most importantly, what it did, it put me in the same running line into each breakdown. So I approached each breakdown from the same position, and I was able to take up the same position and same running line into every breakdown. So every breakdown looked the same to me. And I thought that was really important for consistency of breakdown decisions, that I was looking at the same picture time after time after time. Now, that doesn't mean that position was perfect. At times, there were dangers of being close, and I had to work out exit strategies for when one-off runners were running in that channel with the 9, picked up the ball and ran sideways with it.
Let go 12!
Ball line running demands a bit of extra work. And that's, I guess you could call it one of the inverted commas cons of doing that. But it was one of the things which physically I always worked really hard and I was capable. And so it was a conscious decision. Like I knew from the stats on the GPS device that I wore, I knew that my running distance was going to be more than the average referee because of that running line. But it was something which I trained physically to be able to do that because I believe that made me a better referee. I was never overly graceful when doing a pivot. I'm a big, tall man, and when I pivoted, I wasn't comfortable. I didn't look comfortable, and so I worked out for me pivoting wasn't great. Whereas a lot of referees are great pivoters. They do it and they're comfortable, and so then go for it. But allowing the ball to go behind my back, I could work out if it was a deep pass that I could look over my right shoulder and see the ball a split second later. And I also knew if it was a short pass, then it was going to be inside. And then I knew I could look over my left shoulder and see the ball. So, the fundamental reality of refereeing is never lose sight of the ball.
Sure.
And so I always knew which I could look over left shoulder or right shoulder, and at any given time I could see exactly where the ball was.
I know that when we look at the video and the running lines, that it seems really simple, but it does take a lot of work, a lot of hard work for 80 minutes, and to always be in a consistent position. I think the important takeaway there is that he always tried to arrive at the breakdown from the same position, so he gets the same picture, allows you to be able to maintain better standards, and the way that you're going to referee the gate, how it works for you. If you're in a consistent position, you'll be able to manage that better from throughout the whole game. And I'm just going to hand this over to Khalil, because Khalil, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about, because I think you took a lot of that on board in your refereeing too. From that video and positioning and the running lines, and you can talk about maybe fitness and working around that, and we can look at this clip. You can just let me know if you want to talk about this clip, but if you just want to sort of add something before that, because you've done it for a couple of years now.
In terms of running line philosophy, very similar to Craig Joubert, I accept that by standing close to the breakdown, by standing where I stand, I'm going to be able to see a lot of the tackle, the roller, the arriving players. I'll be able to see them really well. And if I need to say something, they're going to hear me. If I make a call, when they look up, they have to look up at me because I'm sort of standing right on top of them. But then I give up that I am going to have to run further, but I'm also going to have to run harder or faster if the ball goes to either sideline. But I trust my footwork. I trust my speed. I trust my ability to sort of predict where the ball is going to end up enough to give all those things up so I can have a presence at the breakdown. There are going to be a 3-digit number of breakdowns in the game potentially, maybe 20 penalties. And so if I'm at the 300, however many breakdowns, I'm totally fine with that. And I always complain. If Lee Johnson was here, he would tell you I always complain that when I'm finished with the game, I look at my GPS and I've run 4.5 miles, and I'm upset about it because that's way too much running, just as a number. But it has yielded really good results over the past few years.
Excellent. So I'm going to play. Does anybody have any questions for Khalil? No? Okay. Khalil, I'm just going to play this through. This is just a couple of minutes in the game, and you can maybe just talk about your positioning and running lines as you go through here.
If it's a line out, 99% of the time I'm going to stand at the front. I can see the forwards, they're all important. I can see the backs, they're all important. Again, similar to Craig Joubert, I let the ball pass behind me to Jamie McGregor's chagrin. And like I said before, I trust my footwork. So if there's a close runner coming, I trust that I can dance out of his way before he clocks me. But I also accept that there is a very high likelihood that I'm going to be decleated at some point, cat row style. Hasn't happened yet, though. Let me find some wood to knock on. Another thing that I accept with my positioning, because I am so flat, is I have to trust my ARs, but many of you know how I feel about assistant referees. I do have to trust them a certain amount, but I'm also able to see the A pillar, the B pillar, and therefore I can sort of judge pretty well the offside players who are loiterers versus those who shot up early. And then even with something like this where there's a mini break, I still trying to stay really flat, but by now, in my career, I mean, by now I know that if there's a breakaway, I don't need to be as close because if there's a penalty, it's going in White's favor. I can do that from the other side of the field pretty easily. But here where it's more sort of in the trenches, boom, right there, almost literally on top of that knock on. Even if you don't agree, you can't really dispute it just because of where I'm standing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks, Khalil.
You're welcome.
Yeah, appreciate your contribution. So as far as positioning goes, know where the ball is. Work to be in the best position to make the decision, as both Craig and Khalil mentioned. And, you know, consistency in your running lines leads to credible outcomes. You're in the position and you're right there to make the decision. And the results of that is that players trust you more. So as we go into this into the season, I mean, you know, I just wanted to start with this, where we talk about always remember about our philosophy. We're here, we love the game. That's the reason why we're involved, and don't forget that. And remember that every single person that's involved, you know, they have their own story about when they fell in love with the game and why they're involved. You know, and together we're a community, and we want to keep that community as positive as possible. And we're always learning from each other. So always remind ourselves about the reason why we're here. Communication, clear communication, keep it simple. Use your words. Remember, body language most important, then tone of voice, and then your words. And then we also talked about signaling, primary signal, one verbal communication, one secondary. Make sure your signals are perfect and that they look great, so that your body language is always amazing. Just think about if somebody walks, if somebody sees you refereeing a game and they know nothing about rugby, they should just be able to see you and go like, oh, that referee looks like they know what they're doing. That's always a good starting point. And then, you know, we just covered positioning. It really comes down to knowing and, you know, deliberate running lines, be in those positions early, and then also to move early, you know, and in all those situations. So this was just a brief overview. And as I said, with those clips, we're not being critical, but you know, those were high pressure games we talked about, and for all of us, in many situations, we end up in those high pressure situations where we have to be calm. And I think if we prepare properly, we'll be able to deliver properly and create that sort of even playing field for both teams where they can decide the outcome of the game. And then next week, we are going to just look at contextual refereeing. And what contextual refereeing does, it helps you with your game understanding, to be able to read the game better and to be able to have a better idea of what's going to happen next on most occasions. So we appreciate everybody joining this week. Next week, again, as I said, we'll just be working towards preparing for the season, even though there are a couple of games. There's a game already that happened. There's a game this weekend. And then the following weekend, the following Wednesday, we will actually get into it and go back to reviewing matches. But thanks again, everybody, for joining. And we will see you next Wednesday.